Let's continue on with a summary of the different methods of administration. We were talking about inhalation at the end of the last segment. A drug can enter the body through its transport across layers of the skin or through absorption into highly vascularized membranes of the nose, the tongue, the cheek, or the rectum. So again, this is a method that we sometimes overlook or don't think about, is kind of skin or membrane absorption of the drug into the system. Sniffing or snorting a drug in dust or its powder form into the nose is referred to as intranasal administration. Okay, so snorting something up the nose. Once inside the nose, the drug adheres to thin mucous membranes and dissolves through those membranes into the bloodstream. The intranasal technique is commonly used in taking snuff tobacco, and definitely powder cocaine is a drug that's commonly taken this way. Snuff tobacco, chewing tobacco, and cocaine containing coca leaves, which is the natural form in which people, traditionally have taken in cocaine through chewing on or sucking on, cocaine leaves, can be chewed without swallowing or simply placed in the inner surface of the cheek and slowly absorbed through the membranes of the mouth. So again, the common example here would be chewing tobacco, but it's the same sort of method that's been used for centuries by people chewing on coca leaves. Okay, now a couple of terms that goes along with this, the different way that these drugs are administered and the speed and the by which their effects are felt. Latency period. The time between the administration of the drug and its being observed in the bloodstream. So again, how much time does it take from being taken in, different methods, and making it to the bloodstream? Of course, that's going to vary a great deal if you're comparing oral administration compared to injection directly into a vein. Obviously, a big difference there in how much time we're talking. But that period, that gap, that time that we're talking about is called latency period. And just to help you remember that term, latency is sort of getting at how long before you're feeling it, where it's being administered, it's moving into the system, but you're not feeling it yet, right? The two basic types of interactions may occur when the two drugs are mixed together. The two drugs increase the effects of each other. That's one way. If you're taking two drugs at the same time, they might increase the effects of the other drug. And when the two drugs work together to make a more powerful effect, this is called a synergistic effect. That's what synergistic means, is that the two together are stronger than the two separate. Or a drug only has an effect if the other one is present. So you have to have both drugs taken at the same time for the one to be felt. It's not activated without the presence of the other drug. That's called potentiation. So those two are labeled together in the textbook because they're talking about how the two drugs together sort of enhance the effect or make possible the effect of the other one. So it's kind of an additive sort of process. They're working together. But number two, you have one drug reduces the effect of the other drug, called an antagonistic effect. So antagonistic means it's working against the effect of the other drug. So it sort of neutralizes the effect of the other drug, as opposed to enhancing it. It goes the other way, knocks it down, neutralizes it, reduces it. Another term, important term for this chapter, is drug tolerance. By tolerance, we're referring to the capacity of a drug dose to have a gradually diminished effect on the user as a result of repeated administrations of the drug. So, just the common sense idea here is that the more that you take a drug over time, your body, your brain adjusts, gets used to that drug. And one theme that we'll stress in this chapter, that the body and the brain have a great ability to sort of work towards what you might call equilibrium. That if you're seeing a drug coming in at an increased level, that what the brain or the body will tend to do is it tends to compensate, and it kind of downshifts to bring about balance. And so if you're taking in a lot of a drug or something, the body will compensate and will downshift, and then you get the body gets used to doing that. As you take this drug repeatedly, it's downshifting, and you don't feel the same amount of drug as much as you did before. You're getting used to it. You're developing a tolerance where you need to take more to get the same high that you had previously. And so this is an important, tendency that you see drugs have as a user uses them repeatedly. Now, a related term, cross tolerance, is the tolerance developed for one drug can make one tolerant of another drug that they've never tried before. So you take one sort of drug, you're developing tolerance, you have to take more and more of it to get the same effect. And then you take another different type of drug. It may be in the same family or something. It could be depressants or, a stimulant. But the body, since it's gotten used to the one type of drug, has also adjusted in a way that it's less sensitive to this new drug that you just tried and maybe never tried before. So you've already kind of developed this, what they call cross tolerance. So make sure, again, there's a lot of terms in this chapter. Make sure you go over that. If I'm not 100% clear on things, of course, go over the textbook carefully and email me too if any of these terms are confusing. Drug effects vary based on certain characteristics. In general, a heavier person will require a greater amount of drug than a lighter person to receive the equivalent drug effect. So what we're going over now, as I move to the next section of the chapter, is that drugs do not have an equal effect on everybody. It depends on certain factors that influence how much you're feeling the drug, what the experience is like, how intense it is. And one of them that's been identified in research is size, is weight. Bigger people tend to need to take more drugs to feel the same effect, and smaller, lighter people need to take less of the drug to feel the same effect. So that's just kind of a basic physiological, it's not a very shocking finding. I don't think that size would matter here. The lower water content, a factor that tends to dilute the alcohol in the body, in women makes them tend to feel more intoxicated than men. What you see is with a lot of drugs is a gender difference, where women for a given amount of a drug may tend to feel it more, to get a higher high with less of the drug compared to a man. Now, we're talking about tendencies here. We're not talking about every individual. We're talking about group differences here, but of course individuals may differ a great deal on this. Women also have a reduced level of enzymes that break down alcohol in the liver, resulting in higher alcohol levels in the blood and a higher level of intoxication. So again, it's a physiological difference that you tend to see in the liver between men and women. Of course, these are, again, I'll stress these are tendencies. It's not every man that has more of these enzymes and every woman that has fewer of these enzymes. We're talking about overall average differences. But this tends to have this different experience of intoxication, more intense for a given level for the typical female. So weight matters, gender or sex matters, and also ethnicity can matter. This is not every possible thing that matters, but just some of the almost, sort of at the demographic level or physical level where things could be different. And what you see is about 50% of all people of Asian descent, for example, have lower than average levels of one of these enzymes that normally breaks down alcohol in the liver shortly before it's excreted and removed from the body. So you can see ethnic differences, and the one in particular that's been emphasized in the research literature is this difference that you tend to see among, and we're talking here about East Asians. We're talking about East Asia, because Asia, of course, is a very large continent, but so we're talking really about East Asians here. So with this particular variation, alcohol metabolites tend to build up in the blood, producing faster heart rate, facial flushing, and nausea. As a result, many Asians find drinking to be quite unpleasant. Now, again, we're talking about tendencies, overall group differences, which vary a great deal person to person to person, right? But this is a correlation that we're talking about here. But that's one thing that the research has definitely found, is that you do have folks will have variations in certain genes that affect the metabolizing alcohol, because it goes through a couple of stages as you're digesting, metabolizing it, feeling its effects, and then removing it from the body, excreting it from the body. And in one stage of this process of breaking down the alcohol, the chemical that you end up with, the substance that you end up with as you're breaking down alcohol, makes a person feel not feel very good, because of these things they're talking about here with the heart rate and the nausea and that sort of thing. So the longer that substance is in your body, the sort of less pleasant drinking alcohol is going to be. If you metabolize it, get it past that stage to the next stage, where then it's metabolized and then removed from the body, or at least get it to that next stage, then it's not unpleasant anymore. So somebody who metabolizes that really quickly through that stage is going to enjoy alcohol more. See, so what the bottom line here is, you can see a physiological difference that even can stem from a genetic level that can influence whether a person finds drinking pleasant or unpleasant, or how pleasant they do find it. So that differs from person to person. Now, the next thing that they talk about, again, a lot of important terms here, is they contrast physical dependence from psychological dependence. Let's take just a moment on these two. By physical dependence, they're talking about the drug abuser continues the drug-taking behavior to avoid the consequences of physical withdrawal symptoms. So here we're talking like a physical level, that someone who becomes dependent or addicted on drugs, if they're not taking that drug, they start to feel bad. They start to feel various withdrawal symptoms because the body is craving that drug, and you feel bad as long as you don't have it. So pursuing that drug, taking it again to make those physical withdrawal symptoms go away, that's what we mean when we're talking about physical dependence. The body has become physically dependent on it, and you don't feel good when you're deprived, when you're not feeling the effects of that drug. So it's a negative focus and a physical focus. Now let's contrast that with psychological dependence. There we're talking about the drug abuser is motivated by a craving for the pleasurable effects of the drug. See, so it's more positive here. It's not so much at a physiological level of these physical withdrawal symptoms, like say you get shakes from not drinking alcohol, a physical sort of thing, shaking. But here there's craving. It's more psychological. It's more like, man, I just really want to get that drug because it feels so good. So again, the focus is kind of on the positive, how it makes you feel good, and you want more of it because you're chasing that high. You want that high again. So that's sort of, you can contrast the two, both whether it's physical or not, and you can also contrast them whether it's more of a negative orientation or more of a positive orientation. Substance use disorder. Now, I don't have time to get into a lot of the details of this chapter, but they have a section where they talk about how drug dependency, substance use disorder, how that gets diagnosed by the professionals, by therapists, by various individuals, psychiatrists, psychologists who are making a diagnosis of whether a person has a disorder or not. And this DSM, the book that they talk about in the textbook, is sort of that quote-unquote the Bible that these folks use to guide them in determining whether to give you a diagnosis or not. So they have a section on that. Take a look at that. But I'm just going to stick to this definition here and some related things for substance use disorder. This is a diagnostic term identifying an individual with varying degrees of behavioral difficulties that are related to some form of drug taking. Now let's get more specific with that. We're talking, so what are the rules we're following here in determining that somebody has what you would call a disorder, which is sort of thinking of it as this problem of alcohol dependency or drug dependency, whatever it is we're talking about, thinking of it as like a disease, a disorder, just there's something wrong with you. The focus in this DSM in diagnosing various, psychological disorders is dysfunctionality, that it's a disorder because it's seriously impairs your life in various ways, to the extent and for a long enough period that these professionals are going to go ahead and say, okay, this problem is serious enough, we're going to call it a disorder. And the four things that they'll look at is they'll look at impaired control. And what they mean by that is that the drug is kind of overtaking you, where it's controlling, your more and more life is centered around getting that drug, taking that drug, getting the experience of the effect of that drug. And so you're losing the control over your life and over your ability to say no to taking more of that drug. And it's think of it as sort of like it's overtaking you, and your sense of control over your own behavior is getting diminished, is shrinking. Okay. Number two is social impairment. Well, here you're talking about the quality of your relationships with other people. And somebody who's got a substance use disorder is going to tend to have worsened social relationships. They're going to have problems with family, with friends, with spouses, with boyfriends, with girlfriends, various type of relationships, people you're working with, coworkers, colleagues, various individuals, that those relationships tend to be harmed, and the quality of those relationships tends to drop because of the negative effects of this drug abuse. So these people who are diagnosing will look to see how much are these different relationships being harmed by the drug problem. And they'll also look at, work would be part of that too, is your ability to work and be a good employee, and how well you work with others. Is that diminished by your drug use? Number three is they'll look at risky use, where, that you'll engage in reckless, dangerous behavior. So, are you using the drugs when you're driving? Are you using the drugs when you're working a job? Are you using the drugs when you're working a job that's a job that where your behavior is really diminished, your performance is diminished if you're high? So, I don't know, you're driving a truck or something like that as part of your job. Driving a forklift or something, that if you're high, it's kind of risky behavior, that if you're operating machinery, that you might hurt yourself or others under the influence. So it's any sort of reckless or risky behavior. It could be, things like excessive gambling. You're spending away all the money that you have, your savings account, or impairing your financial situation from gambling, and that's being driven by your intoxication, by your drug problem, that kind of stuff. So it's any sort of risky, reckless, dangerous kind of behavior where you're threatening the welfare of yourself or the well-being of yourself or others through your risky and reckless behavior. And number four is the pharmacological effects. There we're looking at what are the level of your withdrawal symptoms. If you stop taking this stuff, what happens? How strong are withdrawal symptoms? So that sort of thing is an indication of how strong of a hold this drug has got over your system, over your brain, the pharmacological effects. Okay, again, it's about time for a break. We'll continue on in part 3.